Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against.
I'm Joanne's son. I'm a community.
Whether sought or unsought by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, June 10th, 2021. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, friend of the show, Astra Taylor of the Debt Collective, joins us to discuss her book, Remake the World, Essays, Reflections, Rebellions. Meanwhile, say goodbye to the Keystone XL pipeline. After Biden canceled their border crossing permit, the pipeline's corporate backers cried uncle and withdrew from the project. See ya. Biden announces that the U.S. will donate 500 million Pfizer doses to lower-income countries, a much larger commitment than previously stated. Thought we were completely removing ourselves from Afghanistan? Psych! The Pentagon is pushing for the ability to continue airstrikes to combat the Taliban by drone or by warplane. The blob seeps into everything. A bombshell ProPublica report which found that Jeff Bezos, Mike Bloomberg, Elon Musk, and the other 25 richest Americans pay a true tax rate of only 3.4%. It's supposed to be 37%. It's getting some attention in Congress and with the Attorney General. Will anything come from it? Don't get your hopes up. Ilhan Omar is being thrown under the bus by her Democratic colleagues once again. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Brad Sherman, and more are considering condemning Omar for saying, the U.S. and Israel commit terrorism, just like Hamas, which is accurate. With friends like these, who needs enemies? And lastly, prosecutors say that 179 water and land protectors were arrested after a mass act of civil disobedience at the construction of the Line 3 pipeline, which threatens water supply in native lands in Minnesota. Activists are calling on Biden to halt the pipeline, which was approved under Donald Trump. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Sam is out today, if you couldn't tell, but we have got a great show for you. Let's start off with Ilhan Omar, because this is the kind of story that gets me incredibly enraged. So, Ilhan Omar is once again being stabbed in the back by her Democratic colleagues who are caving to Republican framing in a charitable sense, but honestly, I think many of them just believe this. She is receiving death threats, which we'll play one of them for you in a bit, because of the GOP outrage machine over this just very factual tweet that she sent out. She essentially, in this tweet, says that the United States, Hamas, Israel, Afghanistan, and the Taliban have all committed atrocities and essentially crimes against humanity. This is an accurate statement. There is nothing wrong with what she said there. But of course, she is being just lambasted by the right wing. Everything she does, they're outraged by. I wonder why. They weren't so outraged, though, when this guy said a very similar thing in 2017.
Putin's a killer. A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent? You think our country's so innocent?
I don't know of any government leaders that are killers in America.
Well, take a look at what we've done, too.
Take a look at what we've done, too. Was that not very similar to what she said there, or was it just the act of saying it about Israel? I think that's a lot of what we're seeing from the Democratic her Democratic colleagues here, but it's just an indisputable fact. I mean, just to give you a sense of the vitriol that she faces, she tweeted this out, I think it was last night, about just a clip of a voicemail that she received. We bleeped out the N-word, but just so you know, that's what was bleeped out here. That's what was said to her. Take a listen.
They destroy cultural heritage. They destroy history, just like Miss Ilhan Omar, because Muslims are terrorists, and she is a raghead, and every anti-American communist piece of shit that works for her, I hope you fucking get what's coming for you.
So everybody knows that this is the amount of hatred that she received, probably more than any other member of Congress on a daily basis. And Democrats aid and abet this very bigotry. Democrats like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who are considering formally sanctioning her, they're showing their true bigotry themselves, honestly, because they are saying to all of us that the victims of U.S. and Israeli violence don't necessarily count in their eyes, and they aren't able to be spoken about. That the very mentioning of those acts of the United States killing civilians, droning weddings, killing children, or Israel targeting hospitals, COVID testing centers, schools, religious sites, journalists, the buildings of journalists and Palestinian journalists themselves, that very act of talking about them is so egregious that it needs to be condemned. And why is that, though? Because Muslims are disproportionately the victims of U.S. and Israeli state terror. And in the eyes of right-wingers and in the eyes of Democrats like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the Muslims are the ones that commit the terror, right?
Yeah, well, I just want to jump in. When Debbie Wasserman Schultz and everybody who signed that letter says that she gives cover to terrorists, they are provoking hate and possibly attempts on Ilhan Omar's life. That's what's happening with that. Because, of course, Ilhan Omar isn't a terrorist or giving cover to terrorists. She's contextualizing violence in the context of larger violence. And let's just make a point on the context of Hamas. I think this isn't a conspiracy theory. Israel helped create Hamas because they wanted a countermeasure to the PLO. This is from Mehdi Hassan in The Intercept a few years back. Listen to former Israeli officials such as Brigadier General Yitzhak Segev, who was the Israeli military governor in Gaza in the early 1980s. Segev later told a New York Times reporter that he had helped finance the Palestinian Islamist movement as a counterweight to the secularists, like I said. The Israeli government gave me a budget, a retired budget, a brigadier general confessed, and the military government gives to the mosques. And that's because Hamas and that type of opposition is exactly who Israel wants, so they can play this game. This is a game that is being played with Ilhan. It's to obscure what Israel's doing and apartheid conditions there and project there, and it's to smear one of the bravest voices that we have in this country. And we cannot let what happened to Jeremy Corbyn, which was a travesty, happen to Ilhan Omar, and I think everyone should have her back today.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I just want to add this too. I'll go even further than her. I mean, Hamas's terrorism, in terms of a body count, it's not even proportionate. It's not even proportionate to what the U.S. and Israel has been able to do. And part of that is because Hamas's rockets or their munitions, they can't target them. They are, as Sam has said on this program many times, they are just more explosive fireworks as opposed to the technology that is available to Israel and the United States. And we've purposely targeted civilians. It's been documented. And as does Israel. I mean, and Hamas, it's more just a reaction to subjugation. And of course, there's going to be retaliation that comes out of that. So I will say that the actors that are more powerful that are committing terroristic, violent acts, that is even more problematic because of the power dynamics at play there. And as Matt said, making her the boogeyman and wrapping up their attempts to hide Israel's crimes and obscure what's really happening in this apartheid state. They're using right-wing bigotry and bigotry towards her from Democrats as a cudgel in order to obscure that exact situation. So it's even more disgusting because they know that this is the kind of vitriol that she faces, the kind of hatred that is directed at her on a daily basis. And yet they still cynically use that to achieve their own ends. And
I just want to say, with regards to January 6th, this is when we see right-wing violence happen, it will be this sort of thing. It will be people like who left the message on Ilhan Omar's message. And I hope that day is long far off, but I worry that it's going to come because of this sort of thing exactly.
Yeah. So I hope Democrats are proud of themselves because they've aided and abetted this since Omar's been in Congress. Nancy Pelosi was instrumental in this in 2018, I believe. Still another formal sanction of her. It doesn't seem like Pelosi's on board now, but the fact that it ever was a conversation shows at the very least immense cowardice, but mostly it's a lot more insidious than that, I believe.
Yeah, that's early in the day too.
Yeah. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, Astra Taylor will be joining us. All right. Brendan, it's your time to shine.
Yeah, so we have a new sponsor that I am the happy guinea pig for. Sam reached out, said, hey, there's a new skincare product that wants to advertise on the show. And Sam was like, I don't do skincare. And I was like, I do. So we are sponsored by Geologie today. It is a simple skincare routine formulated for daily use. And as someone who has dealt with acne in the past, I have a particular skincare routine that I use. But I was definitely willing to try this, Geologie. And so it's really simple. You go to their website, you get a custom trial, and you fill out this test basically, and you tell them about your skin, and they send you a custom package of products that, will deal with whatever you're dealing with, including sensitive skin, acne, dark circles under your eyes, or wrinkles. And, it comes, a week later, and you get a 30-day trial, including, the everyday face wash, Vital Morning Face Cream, the Repairing Night Cream. And what I really like is the Nourishing Eye Cream at night. That's a retinol. And for guys that aren't using a retinol, there's never been a better time to start because, it really does make you look like your best self every day. And after that, you can continue with your 90-day trial, subscribe and save, and go a la carte. If you don't like the Vital Morning Face Cream or you don't like the Repairing Night Cream, you can say, I don't want that, and, make it your own. And I've incorporated this into my dermatologist recommended face routine, I guess. And it's been really nice, been very seamless, and I've noticed great results so far. And there's tons of people love it. It's been written up in Esquire and Men's Health. And, I think all of our listeners, as we leave this, COVID life wearing masks all the time, and we get to be a little social again, you go to see your friends, you want to be looking your best. And, I think, we could all benefit from that. So head over to geologie.com and take the free skincare quiz. You can save up to 40% on your 30-day trial, and just click the link in the YouTube or the podcast description. That's how they know that our listeners are going to be looking good and glamorous on their website. And you go to geologie.com, save 40% off your 30-day trial today.
Wow.
Wow. Well done, Brendan.
Yeah, Billy Mays over here.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Do we have Astra?
Should be right with us here.
Okay.
Joining us now.
Okay. I'd like to welcome to the program, or welcome back to the program, Astra Taylor. Here she is to promote her book, Remake the World, Essays, Reflections, Rebellions. Thanks so much for joining us today, Astra.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really honored to talk to you. And I will show the cover because my sister made it. So it's extra special.
Well, I love that, and I love the cover. And Astra's been on the show a bunch of times with the Debt Collective, and you've really been, as you write about in your book, involved in activism and this kind of work for many years at this point. So there's a lot to glean from what you write. You start your book with the coronavirus pandemic and around this central theme of breathing and breath, right? So in 2020, there was COVID. I don't know, the audience, I don't know if they've ever heard of it, but there was this thing called the coronavirus pandemic. And also the murder of George Floyd, obviously, where he lost his breath and lost his life and couldn't breathe. Climate change, all coming together. So just take us through that and why you chose to open with that and how it informs the rest of your book.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that essay begins with this, exactly as you just beautifully put it, the fact of breath in 2020. And the seed of that essay was planted because I learned that the word conspiracy, if you go back etymologically to its origin, actually means to breathe together. And so, of course, I was also thinking, like so many others, about how there are lots of conspiracies these days, right? There's lots of misapprehensions about how power works and who's pulling the strings. But it turns out that actually, this idea of breathing together has another dimension. If you go back to the founding of this country, there is something, and it's still in effect, there's something called the conspiracy doctrine, which is a legal framework that is used to suppress organizing, to suppress specifically labor unions. So throughout the 1800s and 1900s, workers who were trying to come together to advocate for better treatment at their workplace, but basically just to change society, were charged with being a conspiracy. So there's a great line I quote in that essay that's something like, when workers meet to try to raise wages, it's a conspiracy, but when bosses do it, when bosses meet to lower wages, it's a conference, right? So this, conspiracy doctrine was used to suppress organizing. And so what I'm looking at in that essay is the way that the long war against the left, against working people, has contributed to all of these injustices, right? To systemic racism and police violence, to the fact we're just struggling to make ends meet. People are drowning in debt, which is something I'm very concerned about. The fact of climate change, runaway climate change, it's because actually, people have been punished for trying to organize to change things. And that long war on the left has created this vacuum into which these destructive conspiracy theories then flourish, right? So it's all connected. So that essay is me, thinking about the conditions of 2020. They're obviously spilling over into 2021. And making what is sort of the fundamental point of the entire collection, which is that people need to organize, that actually, if we want to change things for the better, what's required is a conspiracy of epic proportions. People have to come and breathe together, get organized, build power, so we can actually affect change. And that is what I've been trying to do, in my work with the Debt Collective, and in collaboration with other movements for most of my life.
Well, you write that our inability to conspire is actually hurting us, which I thought was such a great flip on the concept of the conspiracy theory. And you take us through historically the first labor conspiracy case, which I know you just alluded to, from the 1805 Philadelphia cordwainers trial. Could you talk about that to the audience and how that sets the stage for labor conspiracies in the broader sense?
Yeah, again, the conspiracy doctrine goes back to the colonial era. It was actually something that was imported from British common law, and it was twisted around. So conspiracy doctrine initially in Britain was about preventing people from sort of abusing the legal system, and bringing frivolous cases. Somehow it got turned around into punishing those who are trying to build a collective, build collectivity, build power, and go on strike and organize for better wages and stuff like that. So it's one of these things where a legal the law is distorted by people in power. So that was an important first case because essentially the takeaway from it was that labor unions were illegal, and that was the reality for decades and decades. And of course, workers won the right to organize. We look at the New Deal era and the Wagner Act as a kind of breakthrough where workers finally had the right to form unions. And then, of course, there was the counterattack with the passage of Taft-Hartley in 1947, which said, okay, sure, you have a basic right to unionize, but you can't do solidarity strikes, you can't do sit-down strikes. And so then, once again, makes many forms of solidarity and conspiring illegal. So it's just, I think it's really important for those of us who are struggling to organize to put this all in historical context and realize just how threatening it is, just how threatening organizing is to the status quo, right? They wouldn't have to make it illegal to engage in this legal suppression of solidarity if there wasn't something incredibly powerful about it. And so, this word, I think conspire is something we do need to reclaim, and I was also consciously pushing back against the fact that, the takeaway from so many liberals in this moment of these destructive conspiracy theories is, okay, what we need to do is trust experts, trust science, let the responsible people handle it. And I'm saying, no, what we need to do is actually build democratic mass political power, right? So that we can finally engage in the kind of economic struggle and redistribution that we really need if we're going to solve some of these major political and social dilemmas.
Yeah, and you also give some more historical context about, I guess, the modern interpretation of of conspiracy theories. COINTELPRO, Watergate, the lies that got us into the Iraq War, and it just creates this fertile ground for conspiracy theories as we know them today. I want to get into Q, which you write about extensively, but just in terms of from, I guess, the 20th century on, even or I guess modern right-wingers who seem to delve more into conspiracy theories than the left in general, even if they're not consciously thinking about, say, COINTELPRO or whatever, how did all of those historical events create this ecosystem where this kind of conspiracy theory could thrive?
Yeah, thank you I'm like, what did I write in that essay? Yeah, thanks for the reminder. I think that's really important. One of the main pieces of that essay is that the most destructive conspiracy theories have emanated from the center of power, right? And they have been anti-communist, white supremacist, anti-Muslim conspiracies, right? And so, looking at the two waves of the Red Scare in the 20th century, anti-communism, McCarthyism, right? These conspiracy theories have been, again, emanating from the very center of power and have been about suppressing the left. And that has created this vacuum. The other element that has aided these sort of negative, totally, reactionary and baseless conspiracy theories is, of course, our media ecosystem, where basically you can kind of monetize confusion, monetize conspiracism, and be a kind of conspiracy entrepreneur. And so that's the other, I think that's another important aspect that's in the piece. But I think it's really important, to acknowledge the fact that there are grounds for being very suspicious of the government, and that's created this context, right? The context of mistrust, and also, again, the suppression of the left. Because I think part of why an organized, robust left is so important, and an organized working class and strong unions, is what they do is they provide a framework for people to understand the conditions they're living in, to have a theory of power, a theory of change, and to then have a constructive way of addressing these injustices and inequities, right? When you take away that, and you have exploding inequality as we do, when you have insecurity, instability, there's tons of social science research that shows that those are the conditions on which these, again, destructive conspiracy theories feed, and the conditions in which they flourish. So that's where we are.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so much more tantalizing to view your issues as the result of a secret cabal of baby eaters as opposed to just what's in front of us, which is political corruption and capitalism, right? And
exactly.
So I think political corruption is a problem, but as I've become, I think, more seasoned and learned more, you really just kind of find out it's mostly just capitalism. So can you talk about how capitalism in and of itself plays into the proliferation of conspiracy theories, and in what way does it make it so uniquely American, the way that we've created this conspiracy situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's, one thing I acknowledge that piece too. In a way, this country was born of conspiracy theories, right? I mean, it was in the Declaration of Independence, we charged England with, essentially conspiring against us. And so there's a kind of paranoid, I mean, other, people have written about this, there's a kind of paranoid style to American politics, right? This is not a new observation. And so that's something, I think that is something that is deep within us. I think the challenge though, of course, is that we can't just fact check ourselves out of this problem. So that's, again, the problem with the kind of liberal take on this. We do have to acknowledge, as you say, that there is, deep corruption, and that capitalism.
We can't fact check ourselves out of this problem is a great.
Exactly. We have to organize ourselves out of this problem. And so capitalism, I think will support, it will support total, it will support any ideology that's profitable, right? And so this is, again, this whole problem of the internet and, kind of conspiracy entrepreneurs. I mean, capitalism is not a rational system. And it definitely is entwined with the presence and pervasiveness of these new ideologies that, again, are not that new. They're part and parcel of this long historic trend. So absolutely, we need to put the problem of corruption, the problem of capitalism front and center. And yeah, fact checking is insufficient.
Well, I mean, that everyone at CNN's heart is breaking when you hear that, or just posts. It's like,
right.
How could we make this very simple concept very convoluted?
Right.
I'll move off the conspiracy part of your book in a bit, but I'm just so fascinated by the nature of right-wing conspiracies, because everything we're saying, the critiques and everything you're saying, it's a left-wing critique, right? But and so you don't necessarily think that this would be in the forefront of a QAnon person's mind, because there are elements of sexism. Women need to be in the home, this like paranoia about children and what's happening with the children, and we need to save the children. There is patriarchy embedded in there, but are you saying that fundamentally the environment that allows for these diversions to even happen in modern day, QAnon conspiracy, plandemic times is universal, at least in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, I think conspiracism is probably a habit of the human mind, right? And so I don't think we'll ever totally eliminate it, but what we can do is reduce the conditions under which it flourishes. So again, we know that these kinds of conspiracy theorists really thrive in periods of instability, insecurity, inequality. And those are the conditions that we're living in. And there's also, they also flourish because there's a lack of competition. In other words, because the majority of people in the United States, again, they don't have the opportunity to join a union, right? We aren't part of civic associations. So, people are very isolated and atomized. We also know that loneliness contributes to a proclivity to engage in these kinds of conspiracizing. So those are the conditions that we need to mitigate. And you need, again, an organized progressive movement to do that, because you don't reduce inequality if there's no left, if there are no trade unions, right? So this is, again, one of these things where, it all flows back to that. It flows back to that original conspiracy doctrine and the war on the left, right? And so this is why I say that the war on the left has been a literal fool's errand, right? Because it's created this idiocy and how many people could be spared believing bullshit? Well, I don't know, right? So what I say is, the problem is that people are more likely to find a video online that is completely deranged than they are to be approached by somebody asking them, again, to join a union, right? Or to be right, some sort of situation where they'll get a different form of political and civic education. And so these are all problems that have to be resolved together. It's really complex. We have to address people's economic circumstances along with the fact that they're isolated, along with problems of the media, along with problems of our political system. So there's a lot on our plates as potential organizers, but there's no other way. There's no shortcuts.
Right. I mean, and it's just a sense of belonging, I think, is integral to that and agency.
On the sense of belonging, I think it's really interesting because that's one thing the right wing does, right? It provides people a sense of group identity and collective victimization, whereas neoliberal Democrats have appealed to people as individuals, right? As sort of individual rational actors who are pursuing a tax cut or a tax credit instead of building a group solidarity and encouraging people to, again, conspire, to breathe together, to see themselves as interconnected.
Yeah, really well said. And I mean, I think a lot of this was, I think, integral to Occupy Wall Street in terms of a moment where the left said, okay, we're going to have agency and we're going to take this situation into our own hands. And you write about that in your book, your experiences with Occupy Wall Street, the sense of we're all in this together and we're going to reject this neoliberal hegemony of atomization and corporatism, etc. It's in your chapter entitled Failing Better. So I take it that you see Occupy Wall Street in many ways as a failure, but in other ways as a really important lesson. So if you could just talk about your experiences there, which you do write about.
Yeah, almost a decade. It's almost the 10-year anniversary of Occupy Wall Street. I mean, Occupy was the left's response to the financial crisis. And I think we have to remember that the financial crisis spawned its own right-wing conspiracies, right? So what was deeply troubling about that period is not only were we witnessing what was at that point the greatest financial disaster since the Great Depression, but that it was the right wing that was mobilizing. The Tea Party was incredibly active on the ground. As much as they were a Koch brother spawned invention and supported by, right-wing billionaires, they also mobilized something like 500,000 people across the country to protest on tax day. I believe it was 2009. And it absolutely broke my heart that conservatives were seizing the moment and blaming the financial crisis on Black mortgage holders because it was a racist, that was their racist explanation, instead of looking at the economic system, again, naming capitalism, naming political corruption as the problem and demanding justice in the form of bankers going to jail, which of course didn't happen. So Occupy Wall Street, I was very happy that people were mobilizing around the financial crisis. And in the chant was absolutely right. Banks got bailed out, we got sold out. And I guess for me, I knew that Occupy couldn't last. You can't camp forever. And also that's not, a literal lever of power. Right. I mean, it's sort, it's like, so what? What if the encampment had lasted this last 10 years? I mean, what would that accomplish? You have to, what I saw was that what it provided a kind of context where we could, where people, and by we, I mean people who wanted to respond to that moment, could find each other and strategize ways forward. Right. And I think it's, in retrospect, it was a real breakthrough because Occupy did put class back at the center of the American conversation. The frame of the 99% and the 1% was incredibly powerful. People started talking about inequality, started talking about capitalism. It directly led to the success of the Sanders campaign. Not as much success as I would have liked to see, but nevertheless, something that would have been unimaginable a few years before, paved the way for the growth of Democratic Socialists of America, and for the Squad. So it really changed the American political landscape in critical ways. So, my attitude toward organizing is that it's always an experiment and you never get the whole thing. So organizing is never a success. It's always a sort of failure. And that's why the idea of failing better is a really wonderful idea. And what I tried to say in that essay is that, what you have to do, it's easy to sit on the sidelines and say what people should do or what proposals should be enacted. The challenge is figuring out how you get from A to B. And it's really a humbling thing to organize. It's way easier to write essays or to make films, which are the other things I do. Organizing requires, again, conspiring, convincing others to join with you, finding common ground, being a good comrade, and then being like, what do we actually do to begin to build the power to enact the policies and proposals and radical transformations we want to see? It's really hard work. And you do have to become acquainted with failure. You don't know when you're going to find success. And so Occupy led for me to joining with others to form the Debt Collective. We're deep in the fight for the cancellation of student debt and, wanting to build an even broader movement that attacks other issues. But we keep failing and failing better. I think it's a decent motto. It might not be the most rousing, but for me, it's realistic.
Well, and it's the eternal struggle of leftism. And I actually wanted to ask you about what lessons you really did glean from Occupy that you brought to the Debt Collective, because loyal listeners of the show or watchers will know that Astra's been on a few times to talk about student debt and the mounting crisis there, and you've been on here with other debt strikers who are not paying their student debt. Biden has yet to cancel $1 of it. I mean, how did you take some of those lessons to your work with the Debt Collective?
Yeah, I mean, the big lesson for me of Occupy Wall Street was that it was a movement of debtors. That's not how it was advertised, but that was the reality of people's lives. And part of what drew them, even if it wasn't explicit, right? So once I was there amongst the people, it became clear that we were all buried in debt. We felt that we'd never be able to own homes. We'd never be able to save for retirement because we're busy trying to dig ourselves out of medical debt, student debt, credit card debt. And that debt is a consequence of the fact that wages have stagnated. So since the 1970s, we've seen the rewards go to the top, to the proverbial 1%, and regular people have had to compensate with credit. So that means essentially that you're underpaid at the job and then you're robbed, because you're charged fees and interest. And so that was a major lesson. I think also, a thing I wanted then in the wake of Occupy to be part of a movement that was more disciplined, right? Where we had demands and we had kind of formal structures of engagement. And that is important. But I think you also need that magic. You need that kind of chaos in the opening that an event like Occupy allows, where people can just come and be part of something. And so for me, I think another lesson of Occupy that I'm kind of coming to grips with is that you also need that mess, right? You need to be a bit forgiving. A movement is not, I like to say that a movement is not like a pizza that you order up with all of your favorite toppings and it's just so. I mean, they're always going to be a bit frustrating and not exactly what you want. You can't wait around for the perfect movement, right? You really have to take advantage of them when those openings come about. And so, as I've written, I think, maybe not in this book, but elsewhere, I wasn't a fan of the constant drum circle. That wouldn't be part of my ideal movement. But I sucked it up and did my best to take the potential of that moment and turn it into something lasting. And tons of other people did too. And that's what we just need to keep doing and keep doing and keep doing.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the critique of Occupy at the time was, well, we understand they're upset, but what is the goal, right? Yeah. And it's just such a fundamental misunderstanding of the messiness of activism, as you say. Throughout history, there have been unclear goals in activism that has pushed the conversation in a different way, that had fought for rights for people, different factions asking for different things, infighting between factions. I mean, I'm thinking specifically about the civil rights movement, and that's completely whitewashed in people's minds. People always think that the present day leftist push that they're seeing is not analogous to the very whitewashed civil rights movement that we've been taught. Oh, there's one way to do this correctly, even though, of course, we know that back then there was many gradations. But I digress. I actually want to talk about what you wrote about activism, particularly how activism as a concept gained traction in the 1960s. So I think that's a smooth transition to that part of the book.
I think what you said is really important. I do want to say that, part of why I think I was ready to throw myself into the Occupy Wall Street movement when it started is that I had read a lot of history of the civil rights era and the 60s. And one lesson I learned from that reading was that it was a total mess, right? And that this idea that, there was perfect discipline and perfect leadership in the past that we don't measure up to is not a standard we should hold ourselves to, right? People have always had to experiment and felt really hopeless through lots of their campaigning. I think, so there's an essay called Against Activism. One thing, I wrote it quite a few years ago, and I think it's also a bit less timely than it was when I wrote it, and that's a good thing. So the piece argues that there's a difference between activism and organizing. And you can be, the basic observation is that you can be an activist on your own, right? You can say, I'm an activist for the environment, or an activist for animal rights, or an activist for X, Y, or Z. And what you do is you sort of sound the alarm. Maybe you tweet a lot. Maybe you just, you sort of proselytize for your cause. You can't organize alone. Right? That's the thing. It, again, is bringing people together, trying to get people to act in concert, in unison. Organizing is a collective act. And that's when you try to build a social bloc that can wield political power. And I felt, through the aughts, and definitely into Occupy, that there was a lack of attention to the art of organizing, and that people were stuck in the frame of activism. And that had to do with the decline of labor organizing, the decline of a certain type of organizing that was prominent within workers' movements, and also in the sort of classic civil rights era, and that we had moved as a society into a more kind of activist mindset. I think now, though, a lot of younger people, people of the next generation, are revitalizing the art of organizing. And that's something that I take a lot of encouragement from. I think people, or they're reading folks like Jane McAlevey, the great union organizer, they're going back and reading their history, and they're realizing that, we have to actually build a mass base, that we can't leave social change to politicians, to sort of professional NGOs, or to just random individuals, who might mean well. And so that is something I think there has been real growth post Occupy Wall Street, actually, and that the resurgence of organizing is part of that. But at the time when I wrote it, I felt that there was a real lack of attention to this, and it is hard. I think for me, the art of organizing is something I really struggled to learn. Where do you go to learn these techniques? And something that you really learn by doing. And so there's a feeling, for me, that there's kind of reinventing the wheel, trying to figure out how to do this thing that I think we all need to be able to do if we're going to have a democracy.
Yeah, and I mean, it brings it back to our discussion about atomization and isolation, which is 2020 was the most isolated year that we've experienced, in terms of just the everyone having to quarantine, etc. And I think that punctuated a lot of the dynamics that you're talking about here. And so I'll bring it back to where we started as we wrap up the interview. How did that increased atomization and isolation highlight a lot of the importance of organizing. And how do you combat that in a world where everything is so individualized? And I sound like a boomer, but everyone's on their tech, and it's very easy to feel superficially connected without actually having meaning. And it's almost like a sugar high of connectivity. And then you go and you're actually very much isolated and alone. How do you combat those trends that were so stark last year?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I wish I had all of the answers. I do think that we have to, using technology in disciplined, strategic ways is actually part of it. I mean, back in 2014, I published a book called The People's Platform, which is a political economy of the internet. And it sort of lays out all of the sort of perverse incentives of an intention economy. And I think sometimes those can derail us from the kind of deep work of organizing we need to do, right? I mean, you can get more attention by just saying something, that's provocative online, instead of doing this work of like actually building a community and building a base, right? Which is, you need to relate to people in a different way. You need to be more compassionate. You need to listen to people instead of just shouting your opinions. And so the question, that became a bit harder to do in 2020 when everybody was social distancing as much as possible, for those who had the privilege, in order to stay safe from COVID. That said, I think so. I'll bring it back to the Debt Collective, which is the union for debtors that I'm part of, that was formed in the wake of Occupy Wall Street. Part of our mission, though, was always to address the atomization of our time, because atomization didn't start with COVID, as you've pointed out, right? It was something already sort of built into our culture. And one thing we take inspiration from the labor movement. So just like there are unions for workers, we were like, what if debtors had unions? But the problem is that debtors don't share a factory floor, right? Or a workplace. So we always have struggled with how we bring people together virtually based on the fact that they share a common condition, a common form of exploitation, right? So student debtors, again, they're not all just in the same physical space. So that's something we're already trying to figure out how to experiment with, how to build online forums that would have that kind of, that would foster a positive community. It's just something that we have to be creative about. We have to try and fail better, right? We have to figure out ways of relating that use technology, use new communications technologies where they're appropriate, and then realize like, no, we need to get offline and actually talk this over face to face. So, it's something that we have to recognize the risks of certain sort of online incentives, recognize the sort of bigger social forces that are pushing us into our atomized and isolated bubbles, and try to break out of those consciously through whatever means we can. So I think that technology in some ways can play a role if we use it with a lot of intention, and again, a lot of with being strategic at the front of our minds.
Well, couldn't agree more. Astra Taylor, your book is entitled Remake the World, Essays, Reflections, Rebellions, and I'd encourage everybody to check out the Debt Collective as well. Say you have student debt. This would be a great opportunity to get involved with Astra's organization. We're going to put a link to your book wherever you're listening to this show. Thank you, in the podcast, unless you're on Peacock, then just Google it. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Astra.
Thanks for having me, Emma. I really appreciate it.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Mitch McConnell talk. So Mitch McConnell went on Fox News this morning, and he seemed to indicate that his agenda as the leader of the Republicans in the Senate and basically the leader of the Republican Party, Kevin McCarthy. I don't know if he has the chops to run with McConnell here, that their agenda and Trump's agenda going into the 2022 midterms may not exactly be aligned, and that's going to pose some problems. Let's take a listen to his lukewarm response to a question asked by him by Fox anchors this morning.
Will you welcome the former president's involvement in the midterm?
Well, he has his own agenda, and my view is we're going to focus on this administration and the future, what they're trying to do to the country, and make it a referendum in the fall of 22 on how people feel about this new government they narrowly elected while they continue to 50-50 Senate and a close score over in the House.
All right, well, we should let you get back to fighting on the Senate floor. Thank you so much.
Well, that was not exactly an enthusiastic endorsement of Donald Trump's involvement in the midterms. To me, this indicates that McConnell has very little interest in Trump's future involvement in the party. I think he thinks it poses a problem outside of their base, which is accurate in terms of a general election. It's a galvanizing force for the left, for Democrats, for the Democratic Party, for their fundraising apparatus. They raised a ton of money off of Donald Trump and just kind of everything that he said. So I think McConnell's accurate in that assessment, but he's also a fundraising juggernaut for the Republican base. He is a grassroots fundraiser for them. There are a lot of Republicans who will give their hard-earned money to the Republican Party because they love Donald Trump so much. So he's walking this really fine tightrope. A tightrope's fine in and of itself. It's not thick, then it would be a plank. But anyway, I don't know if he's doing it that artfully. Now, luckily for him, he may not have to embrace Donald Trump in the way that he may not want to, because the Democrats are poised, I think, for a significant wake-up call in the 2022 midterms. They're very likely to lose the House, and then you have a lot of roadblocks to maintaining the Senate as well, no matter what Biden does, just in terms of sheer numbers and demographics, etc. And the fact that we are not really combating the Republican voter suppression efforts on a national level going into the midterms. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. But yeah, I mean, what also exacerbates this too is that Trump shut down his blog. He's got no real way of directly communicating with his base in a way that would really hurt Mitch McConnell, because in the past, all Trump had to do was send out a tweet and McConnell would retreat back into his turtle shell, and you know, he would come and bend the knee to Donald Trump because he has the heart and soul of the Republican base. But that's not the case here. Matt, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not certain. I think that the Twitter thing is interesting with regards to how Trump can keep control of this, because it looks like he is, and it's not super surprising to me. But yeah, I don't know. I think because the Democrats aren't doing anything to really push an advantage here, I don't think this is a terrible, tough position for McConnell anymore. Like, I think if there were seats that he was really trying to save, then it is. But I don't know. I think I'm worried that Trump might just be really good for riling up the base, and Republicans are going to vote like Republicans ultimately, and that's what they need from Trump, is to like try to keep some of that turnout sort of magic that he has without being too bogged down in him as a individual personality. And this is actually, it looks like this is the way to do it, maybe, for McConnell.
Yeah. I just read an IM. Les says, way to go, Emma. Keep discouraging people from voting in 2022. No reason to vote. The numbers are against. Probably helps Majority Report's bottom line. Dude, that's not accurate. Please go out and vote for in the primaries, you should vote for the leftiest lefty that you can, and then if your lefty candidate does not win the primary, please vote for the Democrat in 2022. I'm actively telling you to do that.
I think it's pretty ludicrous of this show to be accused of being anti-voting.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, this is not some other online shows. Brendan, what were you saying?
I was just bringing it back to the Trump point. I think it's been interesting so far to see like how he's been dipping his toes in certain races and things like that, and how, you know, candidates now going through primaries are starting to like reach out to him and try to court him in some way. I know the AG candidate in Virginia just accused Trump of not being like tough enough to come out to Virginia to campaign for him as like some kind of bait to reel him in. And Trump's candidates lost in the New Jersey GOP primary. I know the New Jersey GOP is like, you know, different from, you know, what Trump's base might be. But, you know, I mean, I think it illustrates like how McConnell is playing this. Like, he doesn't need Trump to like be too out and out to like encourage Democrats to go out as heavily in the midterms as well. So I think he's doing what Mitch McConnell does.
Yeah. And I agree. I think the sense of things is that while Trump, yes, if he chooses to lend his voice to some sort of Republican primary or a race where there's a MAGA candidate involved, that has effectiveness for sure. But I mean, I didn't even foresee when Trump was kicked off social media how much this would sap him of the saliency and just like the fact that he was so at the forefront of the conversation even after he left office, when he was, you know, releasing those press releases. But now that's been fewer and further between. And I don't know, without his direct line of communication to his base, McConnell may be correct in his calculation that Donald Trump is not somebody that you need to worry about right there. But it will be a really interesting schism going into the midterms if it is that at all. And unfortunately, the Democrats are not necessarily giving people a ton of optimism because now they're saying, oh, if we're not able to pass all of our agenda, if we're not able to reform the filibuster, if we're not able to get what we want on infrastructure, don't worry, we'll just use it against Republicans for electoral purposes, which is just the exact wrong calculation to make, I think.
Yeah, and I would just make a final...
Yeah, that's close to the end of our show today.
Just a final note on the social media thing. I would not be surprised if particularly Facebook lets Trump on at a moment that's opportune to him, knowing who is...
It's a 2-year ban, right? From, I think, a few weeks ago.
Yes.
It means that he's going to be back just in time for... not the midterms, but for 2024, which will be quite interesting.
This is where we play the cash machine sound drop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's also like just ideological, like Joel Kaplan and folks like that. This right-wing outfit.
I'm trying to find this cash machine, but here we go. Boom. All right. Well, this is where we say goodbye to our Peacock audience. Thank you for bearing with us or watching the show. I'm still getting the hang of the tech here in Sam's seat when he's out, but looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow and signing off. I did that so well. If you're sticking around, we've got a fun half for you folks. Matt Binder will be joining us. Do we have Brandon this week?
Yes.
Brandon Sutton will be joining us. Sorry, hold on one second. We have Matt?
Yeah, I'm here. Oh, Binder's joining soon. There he is.
Hey there.
Hello.
Hello, Matt.
How you guys all doing? I've been sitting here for a week waiting to come on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, unmoved. I've just been sitting here since last week.
Well, that's because.
What about your kids?
I don't know. I haven't seen them in a week. I hope they're fine.
Binder, you tweeted out a photo of your daughter. She is so damn cute. How old did she turn the other day? 4?
She turned 2.
Jeez, that was a shot in the dark. Why did I even try to guess?
Yeah, but thank you for the kind words, Emma. Yeah, she turned 2, and it's like immediately, just like that, terrible 2s kick in, and she's acting a little bit more rambunctious than usual. Troublemaker now.
Well,
it's inner blood, man. That's the punk tendencies. It's the
hell yeah.
Punk history.
So what's happening over on Doomed?
Well, tonight we're going to have a really interesting show. YouTube.com/Matt Binder, live at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Dr. Jo Marie Burt will be joining us. She's an author of a book on political violence in Peru. And basically, we're going to be looking at what happened in these presidential elections in Peru, how the Shining Path played a role many, many decades after Shining Path basically had any real power in that country. And also we'll be discussing how Kiku Fujimori is going to be using a playbook by Donald Trump to try to talk about how the election's being stolen from her. You know, those authoritarians got to stick together, you know?
I mean, fascists across the world basically have all their talking points down.
By the way, Matt, I'm in Sam's seat today, so I got the phones just because it's easier and won't cut out. But
perfect.
Yeah. And Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern. Joshua Kahn Russell makes his first appearance on Left Reckoning. We're going to be talking about a few things: Dakota Access Pipeline retrospective, and the good news there, and how to cost pipeline companies lots and lots of money to the point that they give up, which should be the goal for a lot of this stuff. Also staying engaged while Biden is inactive, and also some psychedelics, which probably help. But those kind of, I haven't taken psychedelics recently, but I imagine, I haven't taken them during the Biden administration, I should say, but it might help a little bit.
I saw a study that came out today that said that laughing gas might be good for people with chronic depression.
Wow.
Doses, which was shocking.
Which is such a simple solution that like an alien would think about it. Like, oh, they're depressed. Just give them the gas that makes them laugh. But
Brandon, what happened? Oh wait, we lost Brandon. Brandon, what's happening over on Discourse?
Well, I'm actually editing a great new episode right now for patrons on 101 Dalmatians and Kamala Harris's trip to Central America, and also the lab leak theory re-emerging as one of the conspiracy theories du jour of the mainstream media class.
Wow. All right. Well, we're going to head into the fun.
It's a packed episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, 646-257-3920. See you then.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danarchy's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danarchy.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
You are in for.
Hello, everybody on the fun half. How y'all doing today?
I'm doing all right, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Are we back?
Pretty good. Emma, we are back. Absolutely. Yep.
Well, I
like
taking my time.
I like the image of the Majority Report background and that lone Mike sitting in front of that empty chair. It's an interesting work of art, that image.
Well, I mean, that was just me pouring myself some more water and then also ingesting more cashews. My energy levels just dropped so quickly. Sam really does not, like, he can go without eating for many, many hours. That is not me, to be honest.
The theory stands that his photosynthesizing of just producing media is a self-propelling energy source.
I know. I mean, you said that, and it's really mind-boggling, to be honest with you.
I actually eat constantly. Like, this is the longest period of time during my day once I start eating that I'm not eating, just literally. But I had some hot wings and a Monster energy drink before, so we should be ready to go.
Yeah, I don't eat during streams, Emma. I don't know. That just seems, I feel like it doesn't work.
Well, I know, but like the show is from 12 to 2:30. I eat breakfast at 8 a.m. Like, I mean, I gotta.
Should have lunch at like 11:30.
That doesn't work for my system, my method.
All right. Well, I guess the cashew during show method works better, right?
I guess so. I mean, I probably just I lose energy levels probably because I don't get enough sleep. But enough about that. Let's take some calls, shall we?
Let's go to the phones. Yeah.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 630 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello. Is this me?
This is you.
Yeah. Hey. Well, thank you. I'm really surprised to get on. I'm Andrew. I'm from Illinois. The first thing is I want to thank you all for what you do. It's largely because of the Majority Report I've gotten to sort of work in politics, and I've worked on several campaigns across the Midwest and West Virginia, and I, really appreciate what y'all do in the media, and it's got to be hard with everything going on. So
thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, probably not as hard as working in politics in West Virginia. So thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, and really what I'm trying to call in about is I've been really disappointed with the way I mean, all media, but even progressive media has been handling Joe Manchin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the closest I found was something on The Hill the other day. But, you know, I think the fundamental understanding of who he is and sorry, I don't know why. I'm so nervous right now.
Don't worry about it.
But who he is and, you know, sort of what West Virginia politics is like and all of those sorts of things. For one, you know, when you get to work there, you start to realize that the entire party there exists more or less at this point to get him elected. The just amount of shenanigans with people up and down the ticket and to just punch left is just remarkable. And, you know, just even in petty ways. And the chair of the state party, who's currently embroiled in an issue regarding the foundation of a new minority caucus. I personally, I don't want to misquote it, but I'd recommend y'all listing or, you know, get into that and look into it because it would be just tremendous. But the chair of the party is actually Joe Manchin's cousin, Belinda Biafore.
Wow.
And that presents a just huge conflict of interest, if you ask me. But the important thing in understanding who he is he originally ran for governor in a time when a Republican could not win that seat for love nor money. And over the past, I don't know, 15 years, West Virginia actually largely, you know, survived the realignments that happened in the, you know, the actual South. Into the thousands, and it was sort of tied in with the labor movement and things like that, you know, the Battle of Blair Mountain, things like that. A lot of that was still sort of felt there. And so it maintained a blue status. But one thing that was always very consistent about the politicians who ran there is they were all direct servants to power, because the only way you could get enough money to run in a place where that is especially challenging to reach voters is if you already had it and were paid for. So he basically just was probably always a Republican and always more sympathetic to their issues, but just he had to run that way. You can even look at Big Jim Justice, the current governor, who had to run as a Democrat, change his alignment to Democrat, run, and then change back to Republican again. So, you know, while you can see Manchin supporting things that are maybe partisan in nature, like something that the Democratic Party apparatus would be in favor of, still when it comes to any sort of reform, it's not, you know, he doesn't really get into it. Guns are completely a lost cause. I do know in his personal life, he is friends with a lot of, you know, major members of unions. So that might be a way to get in with certain legislation there. I think the PRO Act may be a little far even for him, but that may be something you could get him on. But yeah, it's so I've been talking, but it's
no, it's good.
One of the realities is too is he's been looking for an out to not be a senator anymore, at least according to what I've heard from some people, and I think that's important. I think the way he goes is going to depend on whether or not Trump actually runs again.
So if Manchin does end up out of the picture, is there like someone to pick up the mantle, or is it like a free for all there on the Democrat side?
I mean, I think that's really going to come down to how the shift within the party happens after, you know, the transgressions of Belinda Biafore against the, you know, progressive and minority communities out there. I really don't know who's planning on running and what things are going to look like, but it really, one of the things there is there's just a massive sense of betrayal that especially people in the what used to be the bluest parts of the state feel to the Democratic Party. And it just, frankly, it just infuriates me to no end that, you know, Pennsylvania is soon going to be a red state, and Ohio is a red state, and West Virginia are a red state, because labor was holding that together. But there are a lot of promising movements and a lot of really promising people there, and, you know, even people trying to do interesting third-party type things because of just the state that the Democratic Party is in. And it is very much a free-for-all. I really think highly of Paula Jean Swearingen and Kathy Kunkel and Stephen Smith. Some of them may present a way forward, or at least, help bring other people in. If I would personally recommend reaching any of them as guests if you were looking to talk about West Virginia or Joe Manchin further, because I was hoping a mountaineer themselves would call in, but because I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but no one was. So, hey, here I am.
Well, I appreciate the call, Andrew. I mean, it's great to have that insight in West Virginia politics, and I think at the very least on the Peacock show, we'll try to get somebody on just to. Any recommendations before I let you go?
Anyone.
Don't worry about it. I don't want to put you on the spot. Okay.
Yeah.
I know Paula Jean a little, so appreciate the call, Andrew. Thanks so much, man.
All right. Take care.
Bye. All right.
I'm a fan of Paula Jean for no other reason than her sharing a last name with possibly one of the greatest television characters of all time from Deadwood.
That's what I base all my politics around.
That's exactly why. Yeah.
Is Deadwood really that good? I've heard a lot of good things.
I was very, very late to it. I think, if I recall, it was a pandemic show for me, and we went right through all the seasons. Picked up right after that. Watched the movie that came out 10 years after the last season, and I wish I got into it earlier so I could have because a lot of people who are longtime Deadwood fans, that movie when it came out 10 years later was a really big deal because actual 10 years passing, and then you actually sort of reconnect with the characters in real life as well as in the movie. So I enjoyed it immensely without even that that weight. So I highly recommend the show. It is that good.
It's funny, actually, as you mentioned that, pandemic binging old shows that used to come on pre-prestige, HBO Showtime shows. I only ever watched one season of Deadwood when it was on the air, but I've been recently binge watching True Blood because I found season 2 box set on someone's stoop they were giving away when walking down the street, and let me tell you, I have not been enjoying it. True Blood did not age well at all. It's actually amazing to go back and see just how poorly True Blood aged.
I remember season 1 of True Blood was really good, but of course because
it was not actually. That's what I remember too. That's what I remember too. The degree to which Bill, the main hot vampire, looks kind of like dirty Paul Rudd in some of these scenes, and how bad the makeup is actually, maybe it's because I have a 4K TV, so I'm watching high def things
Guys, it was just porn for women. I mean,
Paul Rudd's an attractive man, so I don't have a problem.
I like
with
Paul Rudd.
A dirty vampiric fan. Paul Rudd. No, but I remember I remember liking season 1 when I watched it, thinking season 2 was okay, and then after that, when I couldn't take it, that was it. I dipped out after season 2 was over. I think I watched 1 or 2 episodes of season 3, and I was like, they're introducing werewolves, so they introduced something. I can't believe shapeshifters or something. It was no, vampires fine. There was another. There was a werewolf fine, but then they went to, and then I was like, I'm out. I'm done.
Fairies was when they jumped the ship.
I actually, and when it first came out, I watched up to season 4 live, and now I've actually made it past where I was in college, and so it's interesting to revisit stuff that was tolerable back then. I'm like, oh wow, this is actually not very good. I'm actually kind of a Twilight apologist sometimes because I'm like, I feel as though it's just not for me. I'm not that audience. True Blood, I really cannot imagine the audience for it. It's actually quite offensive when you go back to watch it. It manages to sort of have vampires to be a stand-in for Black people, but also the gay community, but also it's constantly full of slavery and slave references of actual Black people. Then they burn a cross on a vampire's lawn, and it's whoa. That's not really...
I know who I think we could pretty much guess who True Blood is for. I mean, True Blood is for older women who would have been into Twilight if they were younger, who missed the social justice movements in their youth because they were too old, and that's who it's for.
I will say though, just to kind of circle back to the callers, original comment. I think it's interesting to hear, just so before we get too far, or we've gone pretty far, it's interesting to hear from people in West Virginia, because I feel like sometimes Joe Manchin exists mostly for Democrats outside of West Virginia to point to why, we can't ever have nice things. Like, he's just another person or another in a list of reasons why, practically good sounding reasons why Democrats can never get anything done. But then when you hear from people like they want change. They want to be part of like a grassroots movement to change the consensus. And so this like language of inevitability about, Joe Manchin, he's the best we can do there, that people outside of West Virginia have consigned themselves to, is just not, it's not reflected by the opinions of people that you hear from there who are like politically active.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to read a few IMs and let's get into the, my point though, Matt, was teenage Emma was very into True Blood. So.
Oh no! I mean, I was into True Blood too when it was on TV, that first and second season.
If you were in,
it definitely wasn't tailored for me though.
If you like True Blood, Emma, I would suggest getting into Supernatural. I'm a big Supernatural fan, and Supernatural.
I just was like coming of age as like a teenager, and the show was filled with naked men, and it was like a very sexual show. So I mean, I was like, whoa, this is cool. I don't really know why I like this, but anyway,
yeah.
I'm still watching, apparently. I mean, I'm on season 5, so it's got me enraptured, or I guess the word is glamored.
I watched Supernatural like in college with somebody, and it is like, how ghost hunters are typically like 45-year-old guys with like Radio Shack equipment scaring themselves in abandoned buildings. This is like, what if hot guys with like shirts unbuttoned entirely were hunting real ghosts.
And Dean from Gilmore Girls is Sam in Supernatural.
Dean was the worst boyfriend. I have to read the IMs. Hold on. Yeah, well, Team Jess. Misfit Black Girl says, Emma, either you or Sam did an interview on Peacock about psychedelics and mental health, right? Yes, that was me. You should plug it as a supplement to Matt Lex plug. Yes, we should all plug the Peacock show more, but I feel like we forget to. Yes, we do a ton of really good interviews on there. HR Data Monkey says, do you think the military could use its logistical and labor infrastructure to conduct projects in the U.S. like high-speed rail, solar farms, etc.? It seems like if we have a bloated military, a commander-in-chief could orchestrate something like that. Well, I would rather just like
they were building the wall.
Yeah, I mean, they could do that, sure, but that's not something Biden would ever do.
Yeah, they're working on pipelines.
Chowder with Crowder says, while Brandon is correct that True Blood has aged poorly, it has only gotten even campier and therefore better. It's not just porn for women, Emma. Let the fellas have our stories. I mean, like...
people say campy. I don't think it's campy. I think it's sleazy. I think it's very sleazy and trashy, which is a different kind of thing to be into. And that's why I guess I kept watching it. Like, but camp is a little bit different. It's not like Rocky Horror Picture Show camp. There's like a veneer of like dirt and grime over everything that kind of makes it more like sexploity than like campy. Mm-hmm. It's very like, it's very sleazy.
I was just a big fan of how Bill would say her name. Suki.
Suki. I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole because we could have a whole episode on.
I feel like there's a spin-off show in the making.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about True Blood, but we could also talk about another real life vampire, which is JD Vance.
Ooh, that's quite the segue. Let's do it.
I'm a professional. So, JD Vance, in a completely unexpected development, did not give Kamala Harris brownie points for her tough talk in Guatemala about the border. In fact, no one on the right wing gave Kamala Harris any brownie points, despite the fact that she spoke like a right winger. Here is JD Vance on Fox News, just doing just that.
Well, I think it's about the fact that they don't know how to solve the problems in their own cities. Yeah. So not far from where Kamala Harris lives, not far from where Joe Biden lives, of course, in the White House, you will see tent cities all over Washington, D.C. You see these things in many major American cities. And what I find so preposterous about Kamala Harris is that she's of course fake about almost everything, but she seems to generally get fired up when she talks about this immigration question. But she seems to have no compassion for the people who are living in those tent cities in her own country, the country that she is the #2 chief executive for. And I tend to think that when you get really angry about something, it's often because you're the most ignorant about it. I think Kamala Harris has no idea how to solve the problems for those people. She refuses to accept any blame or any failure, and so she's just deflecting and distracting from the real problem.
But Kamala Harris, who of course now is in a motorcade, but she served in the Senate, for a number of years now, and there are 99 other senators as well, and they literally walk over the bodies of drug addicts, mentally ill people, unconscious, living right outside their office, and they never say a word about it. And then they turn this kind of moral blast furnace on the rest of us about how we screwed up Central America. I mean, that is deranged.
Well, it's extremely deranged. And if you think about the entire ideology of the American ruling class for the last 5-10 years, it's that many American citizens are privileged, that they suffer from racial fragility if they even dare to complain about the conditions of their own country. And I think what this is ultimately about is an effort to silence American citizens from complaining about the real problems that exist. Let's face the basic facts. Our cities are disgustingly violent. They're increasingly dirty. And they're increasingly unsafe to raise a family. They're also, by the way, increasingly expensive. We know that many Americans can't afford single-family homes in some of our biggest cities. I would love it if the American vice president showed even a little compassion for the people who are living in these terrible conditions in her own country. She was elected, or whatever, to govern this country. She's not doing
Oh!
Or whatever.
So
it's really rich that, I mean, this is not obviously the main point, but it's rich that he brought up how, it's seen as privileged when an American complains about their country. I mean, you're coming from the party that does that. Like, that's literally your whole shtick. Like, anytime anyone on the left or otherwise dares to criticize a simple critique of the United States of America, the right is the first to say, if you don't like it, then leave it. I mean, are you kidding me?
I will say I kind of phased out in the middle there, because Tucker Carlson's face, when it gets real still like that, like real still in the camera, kind of like ensorcels me, and I get distracted by it. But generally speaking, I just find it rich when Fox News kind of pivots back and forth between like having meltdowns about literally the most minor changes in society being the end of the world, to like this sort of position of like, well, the left is so emotionally unstable, always like crying about things like racism. And it's just that's all your channel is. It's crying about, minor perceived injustices, and then like getting this haughty, like actually everyone else is the one who's emotional, while tears are usually still streaming in their eyes from like their last, breakdown about something. I don't know, a free parking sign or whatever being a little bit too resembling of like rainbow LGBTQ flag or whatever. It's that's one part of it. At the same time, like, do they care about the people in America either? Is that their new pivot this week? Is like Fox News?
Point, right, Brandon? Like, oh, Tucker, you're so concerned about homeless people. Have you ever spoken to her? Like, he's accusing Kamala Harris and the Democrats of not, understanding or caring about homeless people that live outside of their offices or whatever the case may be. But it's all a dog whistle. See, the cities are so dirty, right? They're so dirty and they're so infected. But like, so she goes down to the border. They said, oh, they don't care about border security. She goes, she talks tough at the border. And then they pivot to saying, well, she's in Guatemala, essentially. That's like the implicit thing that they're saying.
A country we destabilized quite recently.
Right, but apparently she doesn't have the standing to talk about that because, she doesn't speak to homeless people or care about them in her own city, because she's been California, San Francisco, liberal, dirty. I mean, that's the underlying concept here. Not that I'm defending Kamala Harris. I mean, what she said, she acted like a winner down at the border, and that's not enough. So that's why, just really quickly, Brandon, that was just why, it was such a fruitless exercise and so idiotic for them to continue to capitulate and cave to the right-wing framing. They're going to do this anyway and criticize you anyway, no matter how much you sound like Jeff Sessions.
No, I actually 100% agree, Emma. And I think, what's weird about that, obviously Democrats are hypocrites because, they are just as responsible for destabilizing, parts of South America, parts of the Middle East, parts of, Africa, and causing like immigration and various other crises in, at home and abroad. But the idea that they even allow people who don't even maintain the veneer of caring about like the same populations that they at least pretend to care about to set these standards for them in any real way. Like they jump through hoops for people who don't even pretend to care about the populations that they are pretending to care about. And that to me is very indicative of how like flawed our system is, because the people who are setting the standards are, one, by their own admission, don't believe that racism is real, don't believe that we should care about the homeless population. But the party who has convinced us that they are on the center left is the one who, is constantly finding the need to meet them halfway and adhere to their specific standards for how to prove that they actually care, as opposed to those populations themselves who they're professing to care about, or anybody with any real expertise into how we might actually extricate ourselves from, let's say, any of our millions of endless wars. So instead of turning towards, I think, experts in the things that they claim to care about, they turn to their foils who, get to set the standard for what it means to care about those things, which is just very, facile.
Right. I mean, also, I highly doubt that she is literally, like Tucker Carlson said, literally stepping over homeless people to get to her office. I mean, we got to use that word correctly, right?
I mean, he is right in that the Democrats are hypocrites about stuff like that. And that's what makes, it dangerous for them to not actually show any real movement on this stuff, because a lot of people will only hear like, well, he's right. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden aren't doing enough at home. But this continued, like that always seems to go to the next step of like, well, here's how they would really do it. If they were really compassionate, here's how they would show it. And, unfortunately, the Democratic Party sort of bypasses any other sort of source of information about what it means to be helping communities, and oftentimes choose to jump to Republicans' hoops. And that's like such a, that just speaks to our dynamic very, I think, rather not dynamic, that speaks to how we find ourselves trapped in these situations very, unfortunately.
Yes.
I mean, the Republicans were never going to give her, props for saying exactly what they would have wanted her to say over there. So obviously they take it and turn it into something else to attack the Democrats for.
That's illustrative of the point that we were making earlier this week, is like, there's no appeasing them in this process. So like, I mean, where does the political calculation of even doing this in the first place?
And Tucker, speaking of homeless people, was just mocking the idea of giving them housing. So, like, please, I mean, we're talking about compassion for homeless people. Give me a break. Glamored by Tucker says J.D. Vance implied VP Harris wasn't legitimately elected, saying she was elected or whatever. So even this clown pretending to be the moderate guy to help rural people is promoting the Trump election conspiracy. Exactly. Illuminati kids.
Just on that note, like pretend to be a moderate, like Vance is a Peter Thiel plant. Like this guy's part of a fascist project, I would say. And that's just my allegation, but that's something I suspect very, very strongly.
Well, I mean, he's clearly bankrolled in part and by Thiel, and also, I mean, he presents himself as a moderate because gullible liberals in cities saw his book as some sort of window into the Trump voter and held it up like that meme of the Pope holding up the CD, right? Held it up like gospel and said, "This is how we can understand how Trump won." And of course,
what is that? Hasn't that like facade gone away? Like, hasn't that dissipated though? Like, I don't think anyone still looks at J.D. Vance as some sort of, moderate.
What does he do when he gets crushed in this primary too?
Right. Yeah. You guys saw those polls. He's not even like in second or third. He's doing terrible.
I think the problem is people haven't put together J.D. this political freak with the guy who wrote that book that is on the shelves, right? Like people don't know him that much.
Yeah, I don't think, for example, my dad, who loved that book, has made that connection yet. So
how'd your dad discover that book?
He's like,
There was like 20 New York Times op-eds about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's what
I was going to say
I'm getting
NPR.
at. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, because these institutions love to prop these people up and then wonder, like a couple of years down the road, where did this come from? Yeah, you propped them up when he was selling you a bunch of bullshit and you ate it up.
I mean, I think there is. Oh, go ahead.
About that book. Let's go on, Brandon.
I think that book specifically, speaks to a kind of voyeurism that the liberal Democrat, or even just like the liberal centrist, maybe not specifically aligned to Democrat, finds themselves interested in. And like it also fits into that kind of like working class success story that we see in the the newspapers and in the TVs and in the movies, right? So this idea of like a guy growing up in West Virginia or Appalachia and then like going to Harvard or Yale and like making something out of himself is just, it fits so well into our story about picking yourself up by your bootstraps that it doesn't really speak to the fact that if it weren't so anomalous, this book wouldn't be important at all. Right? If people were if that was happening all the time, it wouldn't be such a, uplifting story, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to read some more IMs. Stop the Meal says a huge portion of the conservative vote think Dems are satanic baby killers. Do Dems really think if they go tough in Guatemala, that's going to change any minds? Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, as I said in our segment on this, they think it's going to... They're looking towards the Beltway media, which like gives a lot of credence to right-wing critiques on border security, and so they just like filter Fox News talking points and make it more palatable downstream. That's who they're appealing to. But because they're taking it from the right wing, there's never going to be any like reality in which they're presented by the media as not soft on the border.
I think there's a degree to which they just buy the I guess ice wisdom that you need to deter this stuff with rhetoric. You need to and I think they just believe it.
Yeah. Trans Sistero Dio says lunch corruption. Emma has been bought off by Big Cashew. Certainly, yes. I mean, there we go. Maybe I'm bought off by Jeff Bezos because this is a Whole Foods cashew. Sorry, guys. Can Brendan give us a Trump bye-bye for that dumb pipeline? Sammy Key says. Brendan? Never mind.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
There we go.
Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.
There
we go. You guys want to talk about Ben Shapiro?
Sure. I always love talking about Ben Shapiro.
I do want to talk about Ben Shapiro, but I also want to make sure we make time for the Magnet Woman, because if this turns into a superhero thing, I don't want to, have missed the boat.
Noted.
We'll definitely talk about the Magnet Woman.
So, Ben Shapiro made headlines yesterday because he decided that he was going to speak about the intricacies of the N-word. Interesting choice, but... Ben understands that he speaks for all black people because he's an intellectual and he can understand the experience without actually having ever been black.
Okay, so here is the full story about Hunter Biden. Now, again, I will say that when it comes to the use of the N-word, there is a difference between calling a black person an N-word with an ER at the end and in
which a lot of Shapiro's fans
using
do.
The N-word that ends with an A to describe a white person. Now, the latter is also really crude and gross and stupid. It's not racist in the same way that it would be if you were just shouting the N-word at a black person, which is the height of racism, obviously, in American society. But here is the story from the UK Daily Mail. Hold
on. I just have to say,
that's pretty much it.
Shouting the N-word with the ER at the end of it at someone down the street is definitely not the height of racism in America.
That doesn't even make the top 10 list of racism of things that have probably happened today in America.
Right. I mean, not even 10 is even being generous. I would say you could list 1,000, 100,000 things that are more racist than that.
It's certainly
done by banks.
It's certainly the only racism they want you to focus on, because it's the easiest to avoid doing. Yeah. Although you would imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, but I mean, there are probably 10 things that Ben Shapiro has defended in the past week that are more racist than shouting the N-word because,
defending Kyle Rittenhouse, yeah.
Racism can't be systemic. It's only just the actions of an individual when they're saying the N-word out loud. It's like, keep going.
That's pretty much the end of the video. He just talks about Hunter Biden.
Can we talk about Hunter Biden, though? Like, I legit thought that story was a hoax until I followed up and saw, and actually that is true. And there is a type, there's a type of guy, white guy, who just loves saying that word, and it is very bizarre to me. But that's all I have to comment on that.
Yeah, who knows? Hunter.
They're so obsessed with Hunter Biden. It's amazing. Like the guy literally has no role, no standing. Obviously he's an easy target, low hanging fruit. And sure, he did once have a seat on a board that people have found questionable. But as it stands in current day, Hunter Biden is sort of, there wasn't even anything juicy in anything here that was about the president, Joe Biden. It was just knocking on Hunter Biden, which, if that's what gets you off, then fine, have at it. But
wasn't there
there's nothing there.
Yeah, wasn't there a Whitey tape with either Michelle or Barack Obama? There's a tape of one of them using the word Whitey, and that was supposed to drop in the Congress 2008. We've come a long way since then, where it's the Hunter Biden.
I really wish that tape would have dropped. But I didn't read the entire article about the Hunter Biden meme. I did see the meme that was saved, and I think I have almost the exact same meme saved on my phone. But to me, it's just right or wrong. It's nothing that really requires defending or even really going into a whole sort of pseudo intellectual defense of, right? Because Hunter Biden more or less is just some weird dude who is going through some problems and whose father is Joe Biden. And so that's kind of separate from somebody as a, I don't know, influencer who's well, here are the situations in which you can and cannot use the N-word as a white person, right? Because functionally speaking, you can't ever police every individual what they're doing in their own personal space individually, right? That's just like not a functional thing. But Ben Shapiro is trying to use this as a leverage point into like mainstreaming, you know, the age-old, I guess, joke / real logic that it's not racist to say N-I-G-G-A. It's only racist if you say N-I-G-G-E-R, and only yelling it to a Black person in public. And so, like, you know, it's that level of, I think, nuance and mental logistics that demonstrates, you know, I would say an obsession with not only Hunter Biden, but with just the, you know, saying the N-word in general, right? Like, because it's like, I don't think Hunter Biden put as much thought into it as Ben Shapiro is. He probably just found it funny because he knows it would probably something his dad would actually say. But, you know, Ben Shapiro has thought about this a lot. He's thought about the, you know, the linguistics, the philology of this.
Yeah, and I just want to also point out that incredibly lazy right-wing punditry, because he's just recycling Rush Limbaugh takes from 7-8 years ago. Wasn't Rush Limbaugh having this exact conversation on a regular basis on his program about the N-word?
Honestly, I really do think every single right-wing pundit at one time or another, but mainly most of them many times, have had this discussion throughout the years on their shows. I mean,
it's a regular for Crowder. Yeah.
We have never stopped having this conversation, at least in some portions of our society. I just think that in, you know, spaces that we travel in, it's just become a joke. Like, it's a joke, you know, it's something that it's such an old joke. It's a joke you reference when, you know, right wingers are having this conversation earnestly on their show because they've been doing it for so long. And it's, you know, it's so obviously transparent because they just want to say the N-word.
Yeah, well, then there's the flip side is there's like liberals who I've encountered who are like, well, I don't think anybody should say it, including Black people. It's like, cool, you are trying to put this like, yeah, go on.
No, go ahead.
You're it's like this very paternalistic, like completely entitled white person nonsense, and it's just the other side of the same coin of Ben Shapiro.
I agree, but I also think that, you know, for a certain type of like white person who is very liberal, it makes them way more uncomfortable when they hear it than some, you know, from a Black person or from anybody, than like they're willing to admit. Like there's you can see it in some white people. If you go to liberal schools like I did, when you like drop an N-bomb, they just like shiver, like you said Mufasa, and they're one of the hyenas in The Lion King. And so you avoid saying it, because it makes them uncomfortable because they've been taught that it's bad to say, and it is bad to say for them to say. And so you can respect that a little bit, I guess. They can't police what I say, but I try to be conscious because they're coming from the right place. When in Ben Shapiro's case, he's not only advocating that white people should be allowed to say the N-word in private if they're singing along to Ja Rule in their home. This is all just a way to say, no, really, they should be allowed to say it in public. And you should understand that there is no reason that there should ever be a word that is denied to them. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, I know.
The weird thing is like that they're even playing by their own rules here and having the ER versus A ending discussion. It's totally a moot point because when they're saying it in private at home amongst their family and friends, they're using the ER one. They're not using the A ending one. I mean, come on, like they're arguing over this stuff and it's the silliest thing in the world.
Even if they use the A one, it's the ER one.
Or if they're in Boston, they're using the UH one. So they can never. So you can never really be racist in Boston. Is the lesson there?
Well, we've always known that.
Yeah, I think you're giving them some too much ammunition there. I wouldn't surprise me if this got out to some right-wing YouTuber and then it quickly spread throughout all of the right-wing media world that, folks, no more worries about ER or A. We could just use the UH one.
I have the presence of mind to know that there's nothing I can say or not say to stop them from thinking that. What's one more drop of water in the ocean, right?
Right.
You guys want to take a call? I promise we will get to Key Lady.
Yeah, let's take a call.
Mailman Paul corrected me. In that meme, the Pope is not holding up a CD. He's holding up communion bread. Thanks for the laugh, though. In the meme, he's holding up CDs. But in reality, yes, he's holding up communion bread. Okay. Calling from a 413.
In reality, he's holding up a Husker Du album.
Yeah.
Calling from a 413 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Dewey from Chicago.
Hey, Dewey, how you doing?
Hey, doing all right. I'm actually doing a little gaming. I was calling in with a couple of points that I feel like it's kind of related to Joe Manchin, but then also like the 2022 Senate elections.
Okay.
So I feel like Sam kept saying that like Joe Manchin, if he really wanted to, could go and switch to the Republican Party. And I'm really actually glad that that caller called in about like the complicated politics in West Virginia. And it sounds like it sounds like he really needs the support of like a whole party apparatus to stay in power. But then also he would get blown away in the primary because he literally voted to impeach Donald Trump.
Yeah. I mean, so, I think yes, but if he's trying to say take Jim Justice's job, and he doesn't have aspirations to stay in the Senate that long, that could be a way to, straddle that line.
Yeah. When the caller mentioned that, I was like, oh shit, no, that actually makes way more sense than him like switching parties. Or if he switched parties, he would go into some other role where maybe he could like hide a little bit.
Right. I mean, I think he's enjoying this moment in the sun way too much to switch parties. And he loves just the arbitrary cutting of a bill, right? He loves that he can be the decider, as Bush would say. And at the 11th hour, he can just arbitrarily decide, actually, I want the tax rate to be 3% lower for corporations or whatever the case may be. So I think there's 100%. A huge ego situation involved here, but
yeah. So the second thing is Sam keeps talking about like, and I guess you guys mentioned it too, that like the 2022 Senate elections are going to be really hard.
I love that we're shit talking him when he's not here, by the way.
That was literally my goal. I was like, oh man, I can't wait to shit talk Sam. Because, if you shit talk him to his face, he gets a little too defensive, a little prickly, but I feel like, he might listen to this later or never listen to it.
Well, I do it all the time. He kind of takes it on the chin.
You can talk trash to my face too. I'm very easygoing.
Yeah.
Oh, Brandon, I love you.
Sorry, man. Keep going.
Yeah. No, really. Okay, so I looked at the map, and if the Democrats have the same turnout as 2020, they would hold the Senate and pick up 2 seats because Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are up. And I feel like they swung really heavy blue in 2020, and that's even with like the giant Trump turnout wave.
Yeah, but they're not going to turn out 2020 numbers in a midterm. It's just not happening. They're not going to bring out the biggest, voter turnout in raw number total during a midterm. They're not going to match it at all.
Yeah, unless Trump brings out a giant campaign called like Trump Coup 2022, and that freaks everybody out, like, because that's why everybody turned out in 2020
in Georgia, right?
I don't know about that because if you look at technically Trump wasn't on the ballot in 2018, and Dems ran on, for the most part, Medicare for all, or just generally a little more policy than on Trump in 2018, and they did super, super well. And it was specifically, I felt like, because the Republicans, whatever that Trump Republican is, didn't turn out, but then the suburbans who were obviously pissed about Trump came out. But
I'll stop you there just because I think it's not necessarily true, and that I do think that Republicans actually did turn out a good amount in 2018. Your points are like, one, I want to say that you are right that the map in theory is more favorable to Democrats than 2020 was for the Senate. But the issue is that it's just, this is what happens. And why 2018 was so successful for Democrats was because it essentially was a vote against Trump. It was the first opportunity for people who were outraged by Trump, which was the entire Democratic base and a lot of independents, to exercise power and vote against him, even though he wasn't on the ballot. And that's what it was. And then 2020, they turned, of course, it was a little closer, but it was a similar dynamic. So I think there's more hope than maybe, we've been saying. I guess the House is a lot more worrisome to me, but if I were to pick one to make gains in, obviously it would be the Senate.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess the last thing is just with that, I feel like people should just go to Arizona, Florida, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina, because those are all super close. And if Dems can hold/flip any of those, then at least the Senate is taken care of.
South Carolina?
Yeah, dude. I mean, it was really close in 2020.
What? Where?
Oh, sorry, North Carolina. North Carolina. My bad.
Okay. Yeah. No. Well, appreciate the call, though. I mean, I think you're right that the map might be there. There is hope for optimism. I hear what you're saying. So, I mean, hope for optimism. There's room for optimism.
Yeah.
Just generally a sense of urgency, whether it's positive or negative. Just the Democrats should do something to try to turn people out.
I mean, I think that's
they should do something, right? I
mean,
agree.
I agree. Yeah, man, that's the point, right? It's sometimes it feels kind of weird to have to sit back and do this kind of prediction and sloppy math to kind of figure out what are the chances, because ultimately it doesn't really matter, because they should be trying to win everywhere all the time. And they just aren't. And the illusion, I think, is tied into, the illusion that they are, or rather that the reason why they said they can't is because they're busy keeping or tiding or holding back the flood of Republicans. And in reality, I think what is really going on is what the caller observed in the first part is, or the previous caller observed, that the party exists to keep a few people in powerful seats and enrich themselves, like the Nancy Pelosi's, the Chuck Schumers. Sometimes it's a state party and it's Joe Manchin, but the overall Democrats lack a strategy for the Democrats to gain and accumulate power and to cycle in newer Democrats with younger ideas and fresher. They're just not a political party in that sense. They tend to be, a method by which a few people enrich themselves. And it shows in the way that a lot of the state parties and the DCCC operates. And so the reality of like, okay, well, they should really be, there shouldn't be uncontested districts. There shouldn't be places where Democrats aren't at least trying to like build consensus and work within, the district to, if it not take power, at least build the Democratic Party there, Instead, they're just funneling more money to consultants in San Diego and San Francisco and Georgia for the Ossoff campaign, the first one, and, New York. They're buying ads in states that there's no way they're going to flip, not because they're going to try to like build consensus, but because someone's cousin owns that like, ad buying company and they need money, right? There's just no strategy. It's just like a get rich quick scheme for a lot of people.
Appreciate the call. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Or not talk to you soon, but call in again. That's what I say when I hang up. Later.
Love you, Mom.
Talk to you soon, man.
See you later. See you at home. All right. We'll read a few more IMs. Isn't the right all about low-hanging fruit, says Justin. When was the last time the right gave anything of substance? That is true. Wyoming Ryan says, you can call me a cracker, but definitely can't call me cracka. Shapiro is just applying the white derogatory slur to the black slur.
When I will say, when you called Tucker Carlson a cracker, he had a whole segment about it where like he had the guy whose face had been photoshopped as a cracker. It was a classic bit. I still have that meme saved on my computer.
I don't remember that.
Like a kid had been
vaguely,
bullied as like a cracker online, and like the kids at his school had photoshopped his head as like a saltine, and Tucker Carlson had him on, and he showed the video. It's like, yeah, this is like what the right is. It's crying about like perceived injustices while telling you should be okay with people saying the N-word if they have the right inflection. Like what? It's actually a soft I. You can say the ER, but it's like pronounced like Niger.
Oh. Wait, what clip is that? I missed it. I was reading more IMs. Anyway, never mind. I thought we were referencing something. Midi Doctor says, hey, Binder, Emma, whoever, remind everyone to hit the like button and subscribe. Hit the like button and subscribe, please.
That was pretty demanding.
Do it! All right, geez. Let's talk about this nurse. So,
hello, nurse. I mean,
this is
not that kind of nurse, though.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there's a bunch of testimony happening at the Ohio State House. The Health Committee is holding hearings and having expert witnesses, including this nurse who has testified that now that she got the vaccine, she is magnetic. I have nothing more.
Yes, vaccines do harm people. By the way, so I just found out something when I was on lunch, and I wanted to show it to you. We were talking about Dr. Tenpenny's testimony about magnetic vaccine crystals. So this is what I found out. So I have a key and a bobby pin here. Explain to me why the key sticks to me. It sticks to my neck, too.
Friction.
Whoops.
Yeah, so if somebody can explain this, that would be great.
You're not magnetic. That's how I can explain it not sticking
Any questions?
to you.
Yes, I have a lot of questions. I mean,
This
hold
is
on.
sad.
I can't.
First, we should say, because I think we should not just what.
I had this in my mouth. I tried to set up a whole bit that I was now magnetic and this was in my bloodstream, but keep going.
I missed it. I'm sorry. Why don't you do it again? I'll pay attention this time.
Absolutely not. Keep going.
I mean, this isn't something that's I feel terrible for ruining the bit, but this isn't something that's just this lady, by the way. There are videos all over the internet, all over social media going viral where people are complaining or sharing this conspiracy that they're all magnetic now,
displaying their superpowers.
Yeah, because keys and other stuff are sticking to them. I mean, it's basically a bunch of people proudly declaring that they're sweaty little pigs. I mean, I mean, I don't know how else to. I mean, that's why stuff sticks to you when you're sweaty and you're sticky. That's what happens. I mean,
this is the new one. I have not heard that it's making people magnetic. I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories about vaccines.
No, it's.
I've heard like I think every conspiracy theory about vaccines, but the magnetic crystals one's a little bit different.
No, it's all over. The vaccine is making people magnetic. It's especially went viral on TikTok, by the way. So maybe that's why certain people who are older and not on TikTok, like myself, I know because I'm crazy.
I mean, this is that common thing of people noticing something that happens. Like, I remember when sprinklers, people were noticing rainbows were appearing in their sprinklers when they would look at it at a certain angle. And they thought instead of just natural refractory, sunlight through water droplets, they thought it was some sort of chemical was just recently put into the sprinkler system, the water. But honestly, this is sad to me. Like because she believes it 100%, and like that people get so misled on a mass level into just like I don't know. They're just lost people, and you want to throw out like a life preserve to them.
I just looked it up, and keys aren't even magnetic. Modern keys.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
But I mean, our understanding of magnetism is entirely effed. Like all that stuff that people put around their wrists and they think like it does something to their blood because there's iron in blood. Blood is also not magnetic. The iron in that blood. So yeah, we're pretty dumb about that stuff.
No, I mean, I think what Matt's saying is super true. Like a lot of conspiracy theories gain purchase in people's minds because they don't really understand like science, and that includes like social science or like historical, or not historical science, but, history. And they observe a phenomenon in, society and nature that's occurring. And because like our understanding of those things is so incomplete, they just can't explain it. And so they go to like the first person who tells them that, because you can't see the curvature of the earth, it's therefore flat from your own vantage point, then that's actually a much easier sell, because I think that in in America, people are a lot more conditioned to the idea that they might be the one who stumbles upon some kind of forbidden truth, some kind of secret knowledge, that they're special enough to be the victim of a unique conspiracy theory that they've uncovered, and also that their experiences and their senses are really all it takes for them to understand the entirety of truth within the world. That's a very flattering idea, even if it's kind of scary that you're now magnetic from a vaccine, that, you might be the center of some conspiracy theory that you just figured out. And, the fact that most people are not going to stumble upon Watergate with their, MacBook or their vaccination or their key is sort of lost, I think, because we enable a lot of people to share these kinds of ideas, maybe not this crazy, as though they are in fact like based in any kind of real substantive like understanding of like the world. I mean, for me, this is no weirder than people who go on and want to talk about race science in mainstream like magazines all the time, but we enable that, I think, a lot more fluidly than we enable things like this.
All right. Well, I want to point out that the person who she's defending, their testimony, she mentioned Tenpenny. She's referring to Sherry Tenpenny. She is an anti-vaxxer, a prominent one. She's like one of those anti-vaxxers who've made a career out of being like an anti-vaxxer influencer. She's not just like a believer in this stuff. Like she's one of the leading anti-vaxxer voices. She was invited to give that testimony by the Ohio State GOP. She is, by the way, and I've reported on this, a recent report found that she is one of the 12 people who are being labeled the disinformation dozen, who are responsible for something like 70% of all the anti-vaxxer conspiracy theories that spread on Facebook, Twitter, all the major social media platforms. She's one of those 12, and they invited her to come and be their expert. And now they have this lady out there defending her and trying to prove her obvious lies about becoming magnetic by getting the vaccine.
I mean, that's really who has culpability for this stuff, is these professional institutions who are using it as a political weapon. And I just want to shout out Tyler Buchanan, who does State House and Politics coverage for the Ohio Capitol Journal, who I believe posted these clips.
Yeah, I mean, to Matt's point, there's definitely value, as Tucker Carlson sees, because he's promoting this anti-vaxxer stuff now too, in like getting people riled up in this way and having them further enmeshed into this sort of propaganda network. And by nature of not being vaccinated and being viewed as crazy by people for like thinking you're magnetic, being further segregated from parts of society that would otherwise give them counter information. This kind of stuff, all it does is serve to like segregate that lady into the kind of silo population on Facebook where like she'll just be have her ideas keep being reaffirmed, keep being, like echoed back to her. And the fact that she's a nurse, or like, Dr. Tenpenny is technically an osteopathic doctor, only serves to like provide the thinnest layer of expertise for Americans who don't really know the difference between like a doctor of osteopathic medicine or a nurse practitioner and a virologist or anything like that.
All right. Yeah. It's amazing. We got people sticking objects to their skin, which, I don't know, I've been able to do since the beginning of time. I mean, I feel like that's like a trick you do when you're a kid, when you realize like, you leaned on something for too long when you were like sitting at a desk and you lifted your arm up and it was like stuck to your elbow or something.
Yeah, a penny
like,
or something.
Yeah. Like, oh, that's cool. Look at that. And then you start like holding them onto you for a long time to see what else you could stick on you. Like, I feel like this is something that
But maybe that's because we all got our booster shots for going to like elementary school.
You're cracking this thing wide open, man. You've really you've uncovered another layer of this. Or even just like static electricity, like people like rubbing balloons against themselves and like holding it to your head so it sticks there. That doesn't mean that gravity isn't real. It just means that static electricity is also real.
Chowder with Crowder says conservatives waking up with 5G vaccine superpowers, and instead of celebrating, they complain to the state government. I mean, yeah, I would be sick if I got superpowers from the vaccine. I mean, that's what I would say if I had superpowers from the vaccine, and if I was the Caped Crusader going across Brooklyn at night, and I wanted nobody to know about it.
There's also the people who think they're going to be like Rick Grimes left over in a year or two as one of the last people on the planet, because there's a contingent of anti-vaxxers who believe that in 1 to 2 years, everyone who received the vaccine will be dead, and the anti-vaxxers will be the sole survivors to continue on the human race. That's another fun one.
Sasha B says the rainbows and the sprinklers is part of the gay agenda, Matt. Get it right. Francis says 10 penny on penny is short. 10 penny on penny short of 10 pennies. I don't get that.
Sounds like a British joke. I can't approve.
Yeah. Francis. Kids these days says, after getting the vaccine, toilet paper has been sticking to my shoe, which begs the question, how does Charmin get the metal shaving so soft? Incredible.
It's just weird because like when you point out stuff like this, like that there's such a thing as like friction or being sticky, it just makes me think like, so you didn't notice any of this before? Like you didn't know how any of this like was working, like that there were rainbows and sprinklers before like yesterday? Yeah. I mean, we have a subjectivist view of problems and stuff, but that's just like, open your eyes, man.
So I want to actually do this cop video, or this, I think it was local news in Arkansas. So a pregnant woman in Arkansas, her car was flipped by a state trooper who was trying to pull her over because she was speeding. Now, she was 2 months pregnant. Her name is Nicole Harper. And she believed after the crash, because it was so extreme, that her child had died. And I'm actually not sure what happened. Based on the framing in this NBC News article, hopefully her child survived. But she was going 85 miles per hour in a 70 mile per hour zone. And that offense was so egregious and extreme that State Trooper Rodney Dunn used this technique to stop her. And just wait and see what happens. It's unreal.
July 2020, Nicole Harper was driving home on the I-67 and is alleged to have been clocked for speeding by Senior Corporal Rodney Dunn, who claims that she fled. But in the video, we see an obvious decrease in speed as Harper pulls into the right lane and activates her turn signal. She claims it was to indicate she was going to exit the interstate, as the area had a reduced shoulder, regardless of Harper's actions and indications that she would stop. Corporal Dunn initiates a pit maneuver.
Can you just pause it real quick? Okay. Like, anybody who's watched a police chase knows what this is, right? This is what cops always do to take out somebody fleeing from them, and it has exactly the effect you're about to watch. I can't believe.
I can't believe it either, Matt. And you can see that the shoulder is not wide enough for her car. So it makes complete sense that she did not want to pull over in the middle of a highway where there's a 70-mile-per-hour speed limit right there. I mean,
looking out for him, actually.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking that exact same thing, because like the majority of police fatalities happen exactly like this, because they pull somebody over on a reduced shoulder, and there's like a car accident or something. Like that kills so many of them, like so often.
and she was really close to the exit. So, but it couldn't wait. It couldn't wait. He was itching to do what he does, as you'll see here.
They hit the inside wall.
Well, what the fuck do you think was gonna happen?
They roll over, get me EMS started.
Well, I mean, what were you expecting? You fucking... Pregnant woman up there dragging that car.
Well, it's just like in the movies when when you try to fishtail the car, it just goes flipping over. So, but unfortunately, sometimes it's not a car full of drug dealers. It's just a pregnant woman who's like going a little fast.
Yeah, for speeding. So, I mean, that's called a PIT?
Pit maneuver. Yeah.
I mean, she deserves millions and millions of dollars. And by the way, I mean, she's suing, and if they settle, it'll be taxpayer money. Sure. Like, the idea that this cop it felt like this was something that he was compelled to do goes to show how pernicious this mindset is in the. I mean,
it sounded like he was at the gun range or like taking free throws. Like he was just putting in the practice, basically. Like, right. I just got to flip someone now.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I think a cop should. I think they should be the only profession that's drug tested every single day, every single shift. Because just super insane. And I should also say, not just speeding people, pit maneuvers and chases in general. Cops do way too much of that shit. What's the point of having this insane surveillance society if you still need to go 90 miles per hour after somebody because they stole $200 worth of merchandise? You're gonna kill somebody.
I'm gonna say,
it's not as fun. This guy must have got a thrill out of this. I'm sure he, if he did feel any sort of care about the person, I'm sure it's because he saw it was a pregnant woman in the car afterwards. If this guy probably thought it was great that what happened. He really did. There was no sense of urgency. There was no he just did what he did and then just turned around. It's like, oh, yeah, well, we got one of these again. Like, this is not a guy, like you said, we should drug test him every day. Like, this is not like an issue with drugs. This is a guy who gets a thrill out of this. Either that or he's just extremely dumb. It's one or the other. Like, this isn't, and neither is it needs to be, it doesn't need to be either one. It could be both.
It's probably both.
But, yeah, this is a guy who clearly, I mean, usually when you see that maneuver happen, like you were talking about, Matt, on, when it's on like a TV show or something, it's like a thing where they have to do it because there's an intersection coming up and the guy's speeding and clearly isn't slowing down and trying to escape. That's not at all what happened here. This is someone who is listening to the law, was getting ready to pull over, was slowing down to show the cop that she was being she was listening to his commands, and it still wasn't enough for this guy.
She had her hazards on, which completely indicates that she's paying attention. She understands that she's getting pulled over. I mean, yeah, it's
no evasive maneuver other than continuing down a path where there was very little shoulder. I mean, I think the line you'd hear from the cops is, "I was worried I was being driven into some sort of ambush or something like that," and that's all they need to say. And I think they'd get a fair. Every single cop would accept that as a reason.
They love to cite their own paranoia and skittishness as a reason for executing like private citizens. But, you would imagine that that's not something you want in a police officer or someone or anyone who you give a gun to. I was under the impression, and I don't know how it works on state highways, that cops aren't supposed to engage in high-speed pursuits because of reasons like this, because it oftentimes, does not actually result in anything other than endangering the other people on the highway, much less endangering the lives of the cops or the person who they're pursuing, right? Like, they made the point, okay, we live in a surveillance state. A lot of times you can just take down this person's, license plate and mail them a ticket, like later. There's no point in engaging in a pursuit.
You don't even need like a big, like crazy, like overseeing Big Brother type surveillance state either. Like a license plate is the most like basic thing that's been around for decades and decades and decades. I mean, he literally, if he was worried about an ambush, could have just taken down the license plate and continued on his way, and they could have issued this person the ticket later on or whatever.
Yeah, he had the dash cam. He had the dash cam that's like automatically taking the license plate, and she is only going 10 miles over the speed limit. Like, what's the practical point of this? Because I think that we accept as a society that a lot of these things are practical, and it's like, well, unless you have evidence that she's on her way to immediately engage in a violent crime, which she's not, there's no reason to pursue her. Like, just give her a ticket, later.
Well,
if you must.
It triggers his sense of self-importance because, wow, she didn't immediately follow my exact thought of what she needed to be doing. She was pulling over, but because he got impatient in his self-gratification, so he could, he wanted to be able to flex his muscle and feel like a real man. That didn't happen immediately, so time to flip her car. And I should also say that Doodles, an IMer, wrote in, I didn't see this part, but apparently there's a second part to the video where the cop scolds the victim and says, "We call that a pit maneuver when people flee from us. That's what happens."
Wait, what? Like on the scene while she's like trapped in the vehicle, he's saying this to her?
Apparently. So
Folks, here's the lesson. Don't if a cop wants to pull you over on the highway where they put themselves in danger and get out of their car on the fucking highway, and they, are standing out there as cars are going 70, 80 miles per hour, don't worry about their own safety. Let them care about themselves. You do what you got to do to take care of yourself.
Yeah, and I just looked it up. That is what happens. So let's take one more call. Do some
unbelievable. That's the real cherry on top. Once he saw what he did, he didn't immediately drop the bravado even and try to help. He's yelling at her while she's in the car. Oh, just Jesus Christ.
I mean, I always feel like a defense mechanism because they do that all the time. After they accidentally shoot somebody for reading a book, it's just like, well, you should have put your hands up faster. It's like they know how to cover their tracks, and and also they want to give a lecture. As Emma said, they want to give a lecture, but also it's just like, well, really, it's your fault that you made me do this to you.
Look what you made me do.
Yeah, abuser logic. We'll take this. Will be the final call of the day. Calling from a 908 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Connor from New Jersey.
Connor from New Jersey. Whereabouts?
Around exit 136.
Okay, that helps. So how you doing, Connor? What are you calling about today?
All right, I want to talk a bit about what's going on in space, and I was hoping I'd get in yesterday to talk a bit more about Louis Gohmert because I thought that was just hilarious. But
yeah,
do you know something about what's going on in space that the rest of us don't? What's happening up there?
Not that the rest of us don't, but I guess just one of Elon Musk's projects that isn't getting a lot of coverage and a bit.
Is it the satellites?
Yes, it's Starlink.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so he has this thing, Starlink, which is actually like a lot of SpaceX launches are just launching these Starlink satellites, and then along with some other smaller satellites so we can fund the launches. And what these do, they're the ones that provide internet to people. It's like a constellation of these satellites in low Earth orbit. And right now it's in a trial period where people can get this user terminal to connect to these satellites. It costs $500 and then another $100 a month. And for the people who are using it, it's working great. Because the idea,
I can't even say that. I've heard people complain how bad it is, honestly. But maybe it depends on where you are still.
Yeah, it might, just because right now they only have about 1,500 in orbit, and they have 12,000 approved by the FCC, and they're looking to get another 30,000 approved. Which, to put the number in, just like somewhere to compare it, there's only about 6,000 satellites currently orbiting Earth. So he's really going to increase a lot of just the total number of satellites. And what I want to focus on, though, is that the idea behind it is that he'll provide internet to like underserved, underdeveloped areas, so partially rural, and the idea is like island nations and things like that. But a lot of the branding seems to be we're going to help these poor countries that don't have the infrastructure and things like that. But that's not the case, and that's probably not even going to be the case in the U.S. And especially when there are many other better things we can do to provide internet to people, instead of, at least one of my main concerns is that I'm in astrophysics. So these satellites are destroying images for ground astronomy just because they pass in front of it. And
right. I was reading a few articles from some astronomers actually like a couple of weeks ago, saying how like literally these lights are going to alter the nighttime sky for the entire world. Like these are satellites are like apparently even brighter than like the ones that have been up there. Like they shine this like ray of light or something. So it's just continue though. This has been fascinating.
Also, like I would just make a quick point, which is like the only reason they would be doing this is not because they want to help people with help with connectivity. It's they want to surveil. It's data extraction, right? Like that's what's valuable.
That was my point. Gonna be my point. Like I would advise people not to put your internet capabilities in the hands of Elon Musk and his mini government and surveillance ties. But whatever.
Oh, of course not. Yeah, and also what's kind of like hidden in it is that he wants to use the money that he gets from this to fund his Mars fantasy.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Connor, I appreciate the call. I want to jump just because I want to get to some IMs before our 2:30 cutoff, but I appreciate the call.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, Connor.
I just want to quickly say that with the Elon Musk stuff that we were just talking about and many other things with Elon Musk and his space exploration endeavors, and then this news about Bezos trying to get $10 billion for not getting a government contract for his space company, and also putting himself into space because it was just a dream of his to go into space. You should definitely watch the movie Elysium before it's too late, because that's the future we're ready to see. Definitely see that movie. It's by the guy who did District 9. That's definitely going to be our future if something doesn't change.
And in terms of Elon Musk, just to jump in, I think that I agree with the caller. I think the Mars thing is a fantasy. I think it's a fantasy meant to distract people from his like surveillance and government ties and the other like really weird projects he's doing. I think that the whole like blasting off rockets for a lot of attention and like shooting a car into space really undersells like the other work that he's doing. So I'm glad the caller like highlighted that point. That, he's just, for all of the libertarian Bitcoin Reddit like crap that he posts, he's just like in bed with the deep state.
Right. So yeah, sorry guys about this 2:30 thing. It's just that we do that interview show for Peacock and I have to prepare for it, and that's why we've been a little bit more diligent about the time recently. It's always sunny or snowy in Ottawa, says Emma. If you ever end up doing a segment for TYT or Weekends with Anna, it should introduce the segment as Casper and Cashews. That's really funny. I was just talking to Anna about next time we can hang out / I can go on TYT, so hopefully that will be soon. Doodle says, play the second part. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I read that already. Just Kofefe.coop says the police even take a loan out to pay off lawsuits. So banks make money on the interest and we pay even more than the original lawsuit. Wow. Yeah, that's
I instinctually believe that because this is America.
Yeah, absolutely. I just that seems like a stone cold fact.
I hadn't heard that before, but I'm very willing to believe that's true.
Right.
I'm going to verify that later, though.
Wyoming Ryan says the millions and millions of dollars this lady will receive should come out of the police budget and pension plans. These pit maneuvers would stop immediately. I agree. I mean, I just think as like reducing the role of the police is key. Essentially, these traffic stops, if as you all were saying, if we're going to have this massive surveillance state, use that and stop with traffic stops with cops.
Well, and also these traffic stops and tickets fund a lot of police force. So they over ticket and they engage in this behavior, which only increases the number of times they just get a little bit too angry and decide to roll a pregnant woman's car.
Right.
So, like just the over ticketing of an extraction of wealth from like poor and rural and Black communities is a problem as well. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. So we'll just read a few more IMs. Meg MCA says you should read N.K. Jemison's The Fifth Season, N.D. Okafor's Akeda Witch, and Binti. She's like really, it's hard for me to pronounce everything. Binti and Tochi Onyebuchi's War Girls. I feel like Sam there, not being able to pronounce anything. Shabibo is repeating the argument that one teacher in Kentucky made in 2006 about the ER versus A, says Crowder's disapproving father. Me and Pillow Guy asked if we were going to cover that Arkansas case, which we just did. All right.
Sorry, just to jump in with a different... we talked about Nancy Pelosi hadn't jumped in on the attacks on Ilhan, but she has. House Democrat leadership puts out statement attacking Ilhan Omar, saying her remark foments prejudice and undermines progress towards a future of peace and security for all. So people who signed that were Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Clyburn, Catherine Clark, Hakeem Jeffries, and Pete Aguilar. So fuck all those people, I would say.
Holy shit. All right. Thank you for firing me up at the end of the show there, Matt. Jesus Christ. I mean, did I say something at the start of the show about how at least Pelosi hasn't spoken out this time?
But I said the day is young, so.
Okay, there we go. Good. Covered our ass there. And the final I am of the day. Prairie Fire Kowalski from Nebraska says, I know how to get Joe Manchin in line. Threatened to send AOC to West Virginia and claimed to be working closely with Manchin. Best friends, really. Like-minded. I like where your head, Kowalski. All right, guys. Thank you. Awesome show. Promote
YouTube.com/Matt Binder tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Nomiki's show at 3 p.m. coming up in a half an hour. Go ahead. What else? Oh, Brendan, what else? What do you got coming?
New episode of Discourse tonight or tomorrow. Like I said, I'm gonna go edit that once I'm done here. So be excited for content.
And Left Reckoning tonight as well, right, Matt?
Yep, 8 Eastern. Go subscribe on YouTube, folks.
All right, guys. Thank you. Talk to you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah.